Welcome back everyone. Hi, if you're new, I'm Tori, and today I want to share with you some book recommendations where I think the less you know about these books going into them, the stronger your reading experience is going to be. I always read the description on the back of books or inside flaps of books that I'm buying, but sometimes I do think the synopsis or the description gives away a little bit too much. But these books right here, I think it really could benefit you to go in knowing next to nothing. I mean, granted, I'm about to talk about them in this video, but I'm going to keep it as vague as possible for this specific recommendations video. All these books have appeared on my channel over the years, so I have talked about them in more detail, but just if you stumble upon this video in particular, you're not going to be given too much information about what these are, because I think they're appreciated with little to no knowledge. It's been a while since I've done a recommendations video, so I hope you enjoy this video. Let's get into it. So to kick things off, I want to talk about a book that I haven't mentioned in a while, but I love this novella so much, and that is The Test by Sylvain Neuvel. You might recognize Neuvel from the Themis Files trilogy, which I also really enjoyed. I actually loved books 1 and 2. Book 3 went a little bit off the rails for me, but overall, that is a solid science fiction series. I really enjoyed the format of it, but also I feel like because of the Themis Files and how popular that series has grown over the last few years or so, The Test gets overlooked. It's so tiny, but this little novella really does pack a punch. We are following our main character, who is an immigrant, and he is trying to take the British citizenship test. It's only like 20 questions or so on the test, but as he starts getting into the test, things just go completely wrong and everything spirals out of control in a way that I promise you can't even imagine. This novella to me is just something that is like waiting for a Black Mirror adaptation. If you like the show Black Mirror, this is such a perfect book for you to get those kind of same vibes. I love this novella overall, and although it is very entertaining and really wild and you can't really predict which way it's going, I do also love the strong social commentary that Sylvain Neuvel manages to weave into this book as well. It just really speaks to the things that I think Western countries put immigrants through to obtain citizenship. So it really is fascinating and it's eye-opening, but at the same time it has this really trippy kind of nature to it. So I enjoyed this and I highly recommend it. Next is a book I haven't talked about in a while. I love this fantasy book so much. That is Middle Game by Shauna Maguire. This made my best books of the year list a couple of years ago, and it is still a fantasy book that I think about a lot. I really don't know how to explain this book. I think even though you have probably seen Middle Game going around a lot and getting a lot of love and a lot of praise, you probably don't exactly know what it's about, because people who have read it and talked about it, it truly is not the easiest thing to explain to people. But at the core of the story, we are following twins, Roger and Dodger. And we also have these alchemists who we're following. And these alchemists, they are obsessed with trying to create the living embodiment of two very specific disciplines of study. And from there, the themes and the concepts and the way academia is woven into this story, it is really incredible. But also you have this emotional journey that you're going on with our two main characters. So I love this book so much. Highly recommend it. Yeah, this is great. And then next, I want to recommend Elysium by Jennifer Marie Brissett. Elysium is, I think to this day, probably one of the most unique books I've ever read in terms of structure, in terms of storytelling. There is a lot going on in here that I, to this day, feel like I still have not really made sense of. But essentially, you have this city that in a lot of ways functions as a computer program, and you have these characters who we're following who fall in and out of love. This is what I'm taking from the story. You have these characters who are falling in and out of love in different ways and different forms as the city continues to shift and evolve and change. And that's really all the summary I can give you for this book, because it really does get very weird as the story goes on. This is a book I would definitely love to revisit in the future. And Jennifer Marie Brissett is an author I just cannot wait to read more from. I think the structure of this story is just so layered, and by the time you're trying to really get a grasp on what's going on, the city has changed again and we have characters in another form. And I think it's just really a book that will keep you thinking, keep you guessing, but also really invested in the love that these characters have for each other and the love that they share with each other over the course of the story. So it is very weird. So I don't think it's gonna work for everybody, but I do encourage you to give this story a chance if it even sounds remotely interesting, because in my opinion, it is definitely worth the read. And then I wanna recommend a book I have not talked about since last year when it made my best books of the year list. I am still thinking about this book, you guys. That is The City and the City by China Miéville. This book is indescribable. It is so good. It is so trippy. But what I love about this story so much is just I don't know, it's like the masterful way that Miéville leads you along. When the story starts, it just feels like this run-of-the-mill police procedural. But what makes the story unlike anything you have probably ever read is the fact that this murder has taken place in a city, this fictional city, that shares the same kind of geographical area, geographical space with another city. And both of these cities, they have their own culture, they have their own politics, you know, way of life, that sort of thing. And our main character who we're following, as he gets deeper into the mystery of who this young woman was who was killed, the more it just takes him on this spiral almost of the history of these two cities and the way that its citizens interact with each other or don't interact with each other. But the reason I say that the storytelling and the structure of it just feels so masterful is because when you're reading it, you know, you have this daunting sounding premise, but when you're reading it, it doesn't feel like that. You understand what's going on. You're getting all these unique and interesting and political concepts thrown at you. And then once you feel comfortable in that, China Miéville opens the world up a little bit more. Then you moved a little bit farther. And then the world opens up again. And then you move a little bit farther. And then by the time you get down the street, you're like, where am I? How did we get here? But you look back and that reading journey was so trippy. This is such a great book, so mind-blowing. And I'm gonna keep this as vague as possible because you have to experience it. Oh, this was so good. Next, I have another book that I feel like I hammered in the ground a couple of years ago. I love this book so much and I haven't talked about it in a while. That is Ring Shout by P. Djeli Clark, another novella on this list. I love this novella so much. I have read it so many times. I've listened to the audiobook. This is such an incredible story, and still to this day, it just feels like one that I really cannot put into words. I love it. P. Djeli Clark, I've said it before and I will keep saying it. He is a masterful, masterful writer and storyteller. I think really all you need to know about this story is it takes place in an alternate version of the Jim Crow South. And we have these demons, these monsters who have invaded the bodies of KKK members. And our main character, Maurice, hunts these things down. That's it. That's all you need to set you on your way. I'm telling you, if you have not read this, it is an experience. And I'm not talking about like, oh, it's so trippy, it's so twisty. Just the experience of the writing, the experience of the story, the experience of the character depth and relationships and dialogue. This is something that you need to experience. This is a book that you just need to read. I love Ring Shout. I get so excited every time I get to mention this book. So yeah, this is incredible. Do yourselves a favor and please go pick this up if you have not done so already. This is phenomenal. Next is a book that I read early last year and I really, really enjoyed this when I finished it, but I feel like I haven't talked about this book that much. It came up again at the end of the year in one of my like end of year videos. I think it was the book Oscars video when I mentioned this book again. But other than that, really have not been talking about this book throughout last year. And that is Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. I know what you're thinking. This book is too big to not know anything going into it. Over 700 pages. I need to know something. No, you don't. All you need to know is that we have a half human, half vampire, Gabriel de Leon, who is telling his life story to another vampire. That's all you need to know to get you through this book. This is actually the first book that I've read by Jay Kristoff, like just by himself. I did read Illuminae that he wrote with Amy Kaufman, and I did read Aurora Rising. Didn't like either one of those books. So this is the first book that I've read where Jay Kristoff is the only author. And I mean, I didn't really have any expectations, but when I came out of this book, I just kind of sat there and I was like, that was really good. The journey of the story, the depth of history and lore, the quality of the story that's being told, and just even how dark it is. This book is really dark. Just even all of that, I mean, by the time I finished this book, it all really took me by surprise and I was kind of amazed by how much I love this book by the end of it. Just the attachment that I did get to some of these characters and our main character Gabriel's story, it left a big impression on me. And I've heard Jay Kristoff say that, you know, of course he was inspired by all the classic vampire stories, especially Interview with the Vampire. I've never read Interview with the Vampire, but after reading this, it made me want to go back and experience that classic. That's just how much I really enjoyed this book. I've mentioned this before. I am so hit or miss with characters who are telling the story in their own words. I think because of Name of the Wind, I have some kind of anxiety going into books with that structure because I really do not like Name of the Wind. But the way it's done in this book, it's so smooth, it's so engaging. And also what I love about this, the video is literally the less you know, and I'm just telling you everything about this book. But what I was really impressed with in this book from a writer's standpoint is the way the conversation bounces back and forth between Gabriel and the vampire that he's talking to. The way that that's happening in real time, but at the same time we're getting like those flashbacks inserted. It's so compelling structurally, and I just think story-wise this is such a great read. So I love this book. I cannot wait till book 2 comes out. But if you're curious about this, just know that, you know, it's a vampire telling his story, and you're about to get a host of history and lore and trauma and a lot of other stuff going on. But I really enjoyed Empire of the Vampire. And then last but not least, the book that actually inspired this entire video is one that I have talked about a couple of times already. And I'm going to talk about it again because I'm still blown away by it. And that is The Rune of Kings by Jen Lyons. This is the book where I truly think the synopsis or the description on the inside flap, I think it gives away a little bit too much. There is something about our main character, Kieran, that is mentioned in this description that truly I feel like I did not want to know. But too much description or not, Rune of Kings is a book I will keep shouting about all year. This was so good, you guys. I really think this is going to be hit or miss for a lot of readers. But again, if it's going to hit for you, it's really going to hit. The story is so complex and it's so layered. I think the only thing you really need to know to get you started with the story is that we are following our main character, Kieran. And he is telling the story of his life in his own words, not of his entire life. It starts at a very specific point, but the story is so layered because there's someone else who is also telling Kieran's story, but from a different moment in time. This is just absolutely fantastic. The history in this, the family lineage, the mythology of it, it's really impressive. I will keep saying that. This book is really impressive and one that I think will just stick with me for the rest of the year. I will be very surprised if this is not somewhere in my top books of 2023. I love The Rune of Kings. Cannot wait to continue with the rest of the series. So that is it for me, you guys. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Let me know down in the comments if you have read any of these, or leave your recommendations of some books where the less you know about them going into them, the better. So thank you guys again, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.